Okay, guys. So before we begin, right, let's have usual rituals whenever we connect online, right? The tech check, right? So if I happen to be audible and visible to all in attendance, give me a quick raise of hand or a Y in the chat box or any reaction that you might be having as an option to give. Okay. All right, so I believe I have enough raise of hands and I have enough yes. I have a few hi as well, right? So hi everyone, right? Thank you for joining. Uh, how many of you are excited for today's episode, right? If you are excited, right, write a Y. If you are excited, write two Ys. If you are excited, write as many Ys as you can in the chat box to let me know how excited you are for today's episode. Okay. So I don't see a single Y with a single Y, right? So it is all multiple Ys. That's really lovely to see. Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. Fine. Oh, somebody's written McKinsey, JP Morgan, yay, Tata Capital, this, that, whatnot. Oh, lovely. Lovely to see that. I believe you guys have, already read about the people who we are going to have today with us. Yes, we had sent across an introductory message for a brief introduction, right, to these people, to you guys. And again, lovely to see the excitement. Though I can't see you, right, but I can definitely say that the excitement is palpable, and that is quite lovely to see. Having said that, right, today happens to be a Thursday, right? And Thursday calls for a think tank Thursday. My name is Abhishek Singh, right? Some of you might know me, right? Some of you might not. For the uninitiated, right? As you already know my name now, right? I happen to be the Chief Marketing Officer at IMS Gujarat, and I will be your host for today's episode. That is the third episode for Think Tank Thursday, where we are going to have three people, three guests who will be speaking on three matters specifically, right? Those are finance, strategy, and consulting. The format is very simple, right? Very straightforward. What we have is I'm going to raise a few questions on your behalf, right? Largely based on my intelligence on what you would want to ask these people, right? And if at all you have any questions based on the answers that these people have presented, right? You guys can put your questions in the Q&A box or chat box. Since there are a lot of people in the webinar, right? There could be a lot of questions, right, in the chat and in the Q&A box. It could happen that I might miss out on a few. So I apologize for that beforehand. But I'll try and cover the most number of questions, specifically relevant questions, right, to the best of my, reach in the chat and the Q&A box. With that, I would like to introduce our first guest for today, right? Before introducing the first guest, right? Any guesses, right? Who could be the first guest? The name is, on your screen already. Yes, you know that already. But before, I introduce you to the first guest, I had one more important thing to tell you guys, that next Thursday, right, we are going to have the fourth episode of Think Tank Thursday, which would be on Indian economy. This is one session that, is as important as any, right, that you must attend. मैं होप करता हूँ, ठीक है, मैं ये मानता हूँ अभी तो कि आप जिस भी MBA कॉलेज के लिए तैयारी कर रहे हैं, ठीक है, MBA के लिए तो कर ही रहे हैं, राइट, you are going to contribute to Indian economy in some capacity, right? And this session, can provide you with that base wherein you can understand Indian economy firsthand. And I hope, right, that you go on and contribute a lot to India's economy, right? We are a country which is making a lot of noise for the good, for the better. And we rely on you guys a lot to take that onus further forward and, probably make India Sone Ki Chidiya one more time, and this time forever. Right? With that, right, talking about Sone Ki Chidiya, right, we have our first guest with us, right? That's Saloni Garg, right? Saloni is an associate director at Tata Capital, right? She's a pass out of IIFT Delhi, right? She's done so much, right? She's has achieved so much that, I could take 10-15 minutes just to speak on those matters. But without wasting much time, I would now invite Saloni to our students. Saloni, I'll make you the co-host. With that, I believe you'll be able to, switch on your video to our students as well. Welcome, Saloni. Guys, you can also welcome Saloni, right, with your messages in the chat.
Hi everyone. Hi Abhishek. I hope I'm very clear and audible to everyone. In case there are any issues, let me know.
Sure, Saloni, you are audible and visible. Yes, I believe we should kick off with the session. What do you say?
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much for this warm and, such a very beautiful welcome that, you charted out for me. Just a small correction though. I wish I was the associate director. I'm only an assistant vice president. Oh. But that's okay. So that's okay. So hi everyone. So, my role is maybe not as fancy and flouncy as Abhishek made it seem. I'm an assistant vice president strategy in Tata Capital. Although you can see my role as more of an amalgamation of both strategy and finance. So, I can kind of field your queries in both of those fields to some extent, at least to the extent that my knowledge goes. Abhishek, do you want me to just start off with
I'll post questions to you, Saloni, and you can go on to answer those. So as you were mentioning, what you do, right? You've mentioned a little about your profile. Our students would be wanting to know a little more about your profile. The first question that I would want to ask is about that, right? What does your profile look like? What do you do? And what does your routine day look like, right? This is something, which everybody wants to know, that after you're done with an MBA, right? You are at a top-notch company doing a top-notch profile. What does your day look like?
Okay, so, like I mentioned, my current profile is somewhat of a cross between strategy and finance. What we do is we basically assist the CFO in each and every one of his requirements, or, in however he wants to push his mandate across the company. So, this is more like a founder's office role or an MD's office role, however you put it. A lot of these roles have been cropping up recently, especially with the emergence of, new companies like your fintechs, etc., which have been coming up. So these roles have been cropping up in the industry a lot. What they do is just a brief outline. Why such roles are coveted. One, because they give you great exposure. So your interaction is straight away with your CXOs and, one downs, nothing below that. Two, it provides you with a great network, as a corollary. So that's directly related. And three, it kind of gives you an idea about everything that is happening, maybe not in depth of everything, but, you get a broad outline of what is happening in the company, how the major functions look like, and where does finance. So in my instance, because it's a CFO's office, so, you kind of figure out how does finance figure into the larger scheme of things. So Tata Capital, to the uninitiated, is an NBFC. And, my profile specifically, what we do, is, say any strategic investments that Tata Capital has to make, any finance related internal, projects that might come, say something like cost optimization, anything on process re-engineering, even something as tiny as, vendor payments, all these things basically fall under our ambit. A lot of our work is ad hoc because, as I mentioned, it's mainly to do with interacting with the CFO and pushing his agenda across. So, that keeps changing with the company's strategy a little bit here and there. And so I would say about 50% of my work is fixed, 50% of my work is ad hoc. The fixed part of my work is keeping an eye on the competitors, keeping an eye on the space in general. So, NBFC space or the fintech space, because, your immediate competitors right now are not just a Bajaj Finance or Aditya Birla Capital. It's all the other fintechs that are entering lending segment. So that is something. Tracking the macroeconomy, that is a big part of it. And another big part of it is preparing the investor presentations. So Tata Capital is not an equity listed company, it's a debt listed company, but we do put out an investor presentation. So it's me and a colleague of mine who work on it quarterly. So that's more of our BAU. In terms of ad hoc projects that I worked on so far, have worked on analyzing a couple of good deals for the company. I've been here sorry, I forgot to mention, I've been here only like some 8 to 9 months. So my experience is little, short, I would say. But yes, I've covered a couple of decent deals. We have made several presentations to the Tata Group, chairman, that's your Mr. N. Chandrasekharan, which was again great exposure. So those kind of things, we worked on a cost optimization project, identifying where can we bring in more efficiencies within the firm, driving in a finance transformation project as well within the firm, trying to see, if basically there are some, key hitches here and there in the processes, trying to iron those out. So it may sound very random, but that's how my role is. It's very random. So, when you ask, how does my day look like? It's very much dependent on my CFO's mood, I would say. So
Okay.
each morning when we go, obviously, if you're working on a project, then we know that that's what's going to take precedence. But any fine day, the mandate might come from our CEO, MD, anyone that, okay, this needs to take precedence. So everything just shifts to the back burner and that takes precedence. So it's very hard to predict a regular day. But as I've mentioned, some part of my work are, BAU, which I have to do regardless. So which includes your industry monitoring, your macroeconomy monitoring, and your competitor benchmarking. And again, your investor presentation and such. So I think, yeah, that would be I try to make it brief.
It's quite dynamic, so it must be quite exciting as well, right? So when you know what you have to do, right, you know what you have to do. But when you don't know what you have to do, right, it sometimes is a challenge that is generally cherished by people these days. Anyway, for the students, right, there are certain terms, right, that Saloni is using, right, which are or which could be technical in nature, right? So you guys can make a note of it, right, and you guys can do your research on that, right? We would not be able to elaborate each of the thing that she does, or every term that we talk about today, right, in today's session itself, right? So everything that Saloni has to mention, or the other two speakers would have to mention, right, you find it interesting, you find it to be something that you haven't heard of, or you've heard of but you would want to know more about it, right? Put in your research, right? Saloni, you mentioned that your day is quite unpredictable. Though you mentioned that you have been working in this particular position for roughly 7 to 8 months. You said that it has been some lesser time that you've worked. It's not been a lot, but you've done a lot, right? So yeah, how do you keep yourself motivated through the day, right? Because for us, right, it seemed a lot through the day, right? A lot through the day.
I think having a good team is important. So ours is a very small team, which is a 3-member team. That includes my manager. And I think because we have a very good communication between the three of us, that kind of keeps us motivated. And I think the nature of work itself, you end up interacting with such, inspiring people on some days that you want to be in their proximity, you want to learn from them. And I think that also somewhat keeps you motivated. So I think, and learning, of course. So see, like I mentioned, I'm very new to this industry, I would say. So before this, just as a very, very, very brief intro, I was working with JP Morgan and Bank of Tokyo. So with Bank of Tokyo and JP Morgan, I was in credit risk. So credit risk is a whole, it's a whole other ball game. Very predictable work-life balance, and you have a different industry to look into. So NBFCs was not something I'd looked at. So because this is all new to me, it's still great learning. And I think that's what drives me. If I feel that if I'm learning a couple of new things every week, I think that's important for me. So yeah.
So the next question that I have is, much more relatable to these students that we have in attendance. So, wherever you've gotten to, right, getting there is a process, right? So what has been your journey like, number one? Number two, you mentioned that, the industry, the businesses, the way management is carried out, right, is evolving at a rapid pace. How getting to, a top-notch B school, like you did, helps you, put your mindset to that, helps you build on the right perspective, right, and take it from strength to strength?
Abhishek, I'm really sorry. Just give me a second. Just give me a second, please.
No worries. Take your time. Meanwhile, students have been really thankful for you to take out precious time, right? They are thanking us in the chat for you to take out time for them today.
Yeah, sorry. There's someone who's been calling me back to back, even though I've put like my other things on D&D. That's why I just wanted to be sure that there's nothing exploding out there.
Yeah. That's how the life is if you are the assistant vice president at a company like Tata Capital.
To be honest, I was working like right 1 minute before the session started. So that's why I'm just worried that whatever mail I sent to my boss did not kind of bounce back or kind of explode on me. But yeah, coming to my journey, I'm really sorry for the, for digressing. So very briefly, I'm an engineer. I did my electronics and communication engineering. Then I did my MBA from IFT Delhi, where I majored in finance and trade. Did not use the trade part. Got into finance. From there on, I got into JP Morgan in credit analysis unit, and from there I moved on to the credit portfolio management team in Bank of Tokyo. Right. My profile, just to tell everyone, just to be very, very clear, has never been fin heavy. I've been a science and engineering STEM student throughout. And, so that's been kind of my professional journey. Moved to Tata Capital mainly because I wanted to try something, try a role where it's more ad hoc, where I'm kind of on my toes the entire time. And where again, I wanted to learn something new. That was the main reason for me to move. Now, in terms of the journey, Abhishek, just trying to understand, would everyone benefit from me telling about my interviews, or what kind of processes have I been through, or
yes. If you could include a few things, in bits and pieces, specifically from the interviews, right? How the placements were like, how the interviews were like, right? And of course, I would want to add one more question to this, since you mentioned that, your profile has been more of a STEM, right? You got into JP Morgan Chase, right? So how fin heavy does a CV need to be for a company like JP Morgan Chase or Bank of Tokyo or Goldman Sachs for that matter?
So I think the answer, in my case at least, was that not at all. I was always very worried when I was at IMS studying myself. I used to keep asking everyone I found that, do I need to do a CFA? Should I have done a CA to get into finance, or, should I do an FRM? I even registered for an FRM, to be honest, did not end up giving one. The fact is that as long as you know your content, so I did go through the CFA books, if that helps. I did not clear the exam, but I did go through the level 1 books, kind of try to, grasp the concepts try to cover the basics of finance, because I knew that's what I'm interested in. This is not all before MBA. This is obviously after I got into, MBA, and I started, reading up a little bit on accounts, started reading up a lot on your, finance related news, basically, because I think market awareness is very key when it comes to finance in general. So kind of built up on all of those things, because I knew that this is where I wanted to head in terms of my career. And I knew that these kind of steps will help me get there little by little, because my CV actually, if you just pick it up, you remove the company's names, you will not see you will not see it as a fin CV. So that was one. In terms of my processes, I think I think Vipul sir had advised me, like when I was interviewing in everywhere, that you should always remember that you are, talking to a human being. So just be yourself. So there were often instances, when you don't know a certain, question in finance, especially. There's so many technicalities, right? There are ratios that you need to learn, accounting standards that you need to know. So it was always okay to say that I don't know, but I'm willing to learn. So that was a key, part of my journey everywhere, that I have always just demonstrated this, willingness to learn whatever be the scenario. So I think that was, one good takeaway that I've seen in all my years in finance, almost 5 years now. So yes. But in case anyone has any specific questions on credit risk, on, my current role, please feel free to ask. We can also catch up later if needed.
I'm sure a lot of students would be connecting with you on LinkedIn, right? So, guys, LinkedIn is a place, right, where you could professionally connect with Saloni. Saloni, taking a bit of a divergence, from the things that we are talking, talking something, that you've been a part of. So, if I'm not wrong, right, you've done your schooling from 4 different countries, right? How important a role does diversity play in personal growth? How important is it to learn from your surroundings?
I think for me, it has been absolutely crucial and critical. I think it's a big part of who I am today. The fact that my schooling has been done from X number of places or, Y number of schools. And I think that's because it kind of teaches you how to, thrive in every environment, thrive and survive at times. Because, you meet so many different kind of people, you end up learning so many languages, you end up, learning so much about different cultures. I think that kind of experiential learning is irreplaceable. At least that's what I feel. That has been my experience. It's been critical in shaping how I've been, because what happens, right? Up engineering, where you go, you see dirty hostel, government facilities. You hardly know anyone, but you know that you want to do well there as well. So rather than spending time on fighting with those factors, you just adapt quickly and you move on to next things that you want to do. Similarly, for an MBA, the minute you enter, you feel completely deluged with information and with people who, and everyone seems better than you. When you're just entering an MBA college, it's the worst kind of imposter syndrome that I think most of you will ever feel. And I think at that point of time, it's very critical that you adapt quickly. You just take the best from everyone that you meet, and then you just keep moving on. You keep focus, keep your focus on where you want to be. And I think all of that came because uh, you know thanks to I would say it was luck, right? Because it was my family who was shifting and I was shifting with them, that I kind of got that exposure. And I think adaptability is superiorly important, very, very important in all aspects of your life, studies, professionally, on everything. So yeah.
So Saloni, when I was speaking with Vipul sir, when he got to speak to you for this particular episode, and he mentioned to me that you're going to join, right? He kept talking about how voracious a reader you have been, right? So
Yeah.
what's your say on importance of reading? How and where all has it been a help to you?
Okay, I think so. Reading is one kind of an advice, and I think I'm known as that person in my family who keeps like forcing all the kids to read. I don't think a lot of the kids in my family like me for it, because I don't think there is a skill more critical than that. Excel comes second, if you ask me. The list of skills one needs to do well in professional, personal life, everywhere. A couple of things which I feel that reading imparts. One is a very, very good grasp on communication. It doesn't have to be in English. It gives you a very good grasp on how to articulate your thoughts. I think that's one. It's another way, yet another way. Like, traveling is one way. Reading is the second best way to kind of experience different perspectives, experience different personalities. I am a fiction reader. I'm an avid fiction reader. Non-fiction is not my forte. But I believe that a lot of non-fiction reading also helps you strengthen up your substance. So, whenever you enter an argument, or whenever you enter, not an argument, like whenever you're trying to convince someone of something, or whenever you're having a cohesive discussion with someone, I think substance matters a lot. That usually again comes from reading. Some people substitute that with a lot of visual content, which is also okay, as long as that is informative content, or content that is well drafted, or content that focuses on communication. So it just doesn't have to be reading, as long as you're consuming good content. I think that's really important. In terms of reading, if anyone ever wants to have a discussion with kind of books I've read, or what kind of books am I reading right now, because I think that is one hobby for which I still somehow manage to find time. Even in my professional career, I continue to be a very, very avid reader. So we can always connect on that. But yes, I think it's the best way to own your communication skills, which again are extremely important in professional life, right? If you can't communicate, if you can't write a good email, it sounds easy,
There's a
writing
lot about
email.
it.
It's critical, but it's very critical. All of these come from reading.
could be a differentiator on the outset for most people who are probably, reading or hearing you out, right? So communication does make a difference. And at an early age, where most of our students are, during their bachelor's, more often than not, they, after having communicated or after having given an interview, right, it's a realization that they, get hit by, is that, I had thought of my ideas a lot better than I've spoken, right? So reading can help you, structure that. Sitting at home, right, you could read about so many subject matters, so many different styles of writing, which, traveling could take a lot of time, right?
Yeah,
A
of
lot of
course.
expenditure, right? So something, if you
Yeah.
are not, something that you're not getting an opportunity to, reading can always
Cheapest way to travel. Yeah.
travel, right? Without having to travel.
Without having.
Yeah. So Saloni, I had a question, right? You mentioned that, students can reach out to you, asking for what would be your suggestions in terms where to read, what to read. I would want to, mention a couple of publications, blogs that you've been following. You would suggest students to read to, basically develop a greater understanding of market awareness, right? If you have any suggestions quickly.
Okay. So I would say in terms of news publications, I follow Live Mint and ET Money. ET, Economic Times, ET BFSI. There's a particular subset of that's released every day. So that in particular. In terms of good journalism, I read a lot of Ken articles. So that's KEN. I don't know how many students are into that right now, but it's a very good publication. Maybe a couple of you can pull up and subscribe to it. And they have great investigative journalism articles wherein they explore a theme, every day, just one theme, and they give you the whole background and every. Basically, it's a very very detailed coverage that they do. Morning Context is another similar one that I tend to follow. And just for finance in specific, for any of my finance queries, Investopedia is my go-to even now after I've cleared my MBA and everything. So I think these are a couple of places where I consume my content from. Signal is another one, but Signal not so much.
Mm-hmm.
Mainly it's these. Yes.
Mm-hmm. I hope students have made a note of that, right? We'll try and see if we could document the same if you haven't made a note at the end of the session, right? Anyway, moving on, Saloni. Networking is a thing at B school, right? How does it help propelling a career, right? Can you throw some light during and right after your B school, and once you get to your workplace, how important is it to build an ecosystem, build up probably you could say a brand for yourself within a firm, and how does that work, how important that is?
So, I know I've been saying this, this is important, but networking is extremely important. I'll tell you why. Because see, any campus that you get to, right, it will always just give you your first placement. Your second placement and your growth subsequently will most likely always be, coming from your network. As a testimony, both my jobs after JP Morgan, your Bank of Tokyo and Tata Capital have been through my immediate seniors from IIFT Delhi. And that personal connect that I had with them, that I built while I was at JP Morgan or while I was at IIFT, I think that kind of gave them more confidence while recommending me or taking my CV to the hiring manager, which most often gets just lost in that journey, right? You just keep on going on LinkedIn, you'll apply here, you'll apply on Naukri.com, you'll apply on IM Jobs, but your CV, for that to reach the hiring manager directly, it's very important to have good network. Now, networking just does not mean that you reach out to the person at that particular point of time when you need their help and you talk to them. Networking is just, keeping a conversation alive with like-minded people and kind of building a trust or building a reliability factor, being there for them when they need it. And then in return, you can expect them to be there for you when you need it. But obviously, your quality of work and the reliability that they see, the trust that they can find in you, I think that's crucial to building a good network. In any company, there's so many people that you can learn from. It doesn't have to be an immediate senior. It can be, it can be a junior. It can be someone you're just working with. It can be someone you just met for a day. But it's always good to, connect with them slightly, informally as well. Catching up with them on LinkedIn, trying to, be active, in terms of the conversation and not just reaching out as and when you need. I think that's important. But yeah, I think building a network is really important for your career growth. So that upward trajectory is often determined by your career growth. So yeah.
Nobody hires a CEO right out of a campus, right?
Correct.
There's never a job posting about the same, right? So it's
Right.
networking.
It's exactly. It's all networking. It's all
Yeah,
networking.
yeah. Saloni, a bit of a, I would say a personal question, but how do you balance work and play? What's your play? What's your passion?
So a lot of people might find this very funny. I call myself a professional hobbyist because I don't have one or two hobbies. I have like many hobbies, and if a month goes by when I've not pursued one of them or two of them, for a significant period of time, I kind of go crazy. I'm that kind of a person who needs her work-life balance. That's always been my priority. That was one of the reasons why I kind of moved out of JP Morgan, because my work hours were getting extremely hectic. But yeah, in terms of my hobbies, so say what I try to do is I try to maximize my weekends, right? On the weekdays, it's really difficult, but on weekends, I try to, so I've been learning Spanish for the last 3 years now. I am a C2. I've completed my C2 level. I just practice now for fun because that's something I like doing. Like I mentioned, I love reading. I love doodling. I don't know if anyone, so I have kind of set up an Instagram page for it's not active. I don't do a lot there, but I like to doodle. I love to paint. I love to sketch. So whatever, there are a lot of things that I find them to be like my stress busters, and I think it's very important to know your stress busters, especially when you enter your MBA and post MBA journey as well, your corporate life, because those are what keep you kind of going. Your job will provide you happiness only up to a certain level, right? The rest has to come from your personal life. So it has to be from your friends, your family, and then whatever you do in your personal time. And I feel like my personal time is best taken up by my hobbies and things that I find peaceful, that give me peace. So
You have a lot of design students, right, in our ecosystem, so they might
oh,
relate to the doodling.
I'm not a very good doodler, mind you. All these things I'm doing
Hey,
amateur.
I'm sure they won't be judging you for anything, right? For what they know you and how they know you, right? They're all gaga over you already. Anyway, right? Saloni, you mentioned your time at JP Morgan Chase. You mentioned how you've been managing so many things. You mentioned that you call yourself a professional hobbyist, right? Pursuing so many hobbies. Uh, uh, do you think this is more about character building in terms that when we are generally our younger selves, right? I'm trying to recall on what I used to think and how I used to think, right? We have so less to do and still we complain about not finding enough time to do other things. Looking at your schedule, right, how tight a schedule you have and so many hobbies you're pursuing, do you think it's more of related to character building, and it's not that you get time, you have to find time for the things that you prioritize in life?
So it might sound like, the way of putting it, it might sound like I'm tooting my horn a little bit, but very often, yes, you have to struggle to find time. There are times when my family kind of chastises me that, okay, this is supposed to be a hobby. You don't have to stay up until 2 to finish it off. But say, it sounds very childish, but there are a lot of times when I have homework on a Saturday night because I have my classes on Sunday, my Spanish classes, and I'm doing it till like 2 a.m. in the night. That's because you have to find that time, right? I mean, if that's something that brings you joy, you need to find some time to dedicate to it. It might just be 30 minutes a week. It just might be 15 minutes a week, but that's some time has to go into it, and that some time will always take an effort. I'm not saying that there are no weekends where I do absolutely nothing. I mean, I love just lounging on my sofa, binge watching a good series. I love that as much as any other person, but I know that that might not bring me the same kind of satisfaction at the end of the weekend. So you try to find small pockets where you try to do things that bring you more uh, that make more sense to you. So it could be very different for each and every person, but yes, for anything that you like to do, especially once you're kind of moving up in life, you have a job, you have a family, finding time becomes very important, and it's difficult, but it's something that you have to do. Yeah.
ढूंढोगे तो मिल जाएगा, निकाल
हाँ,
सकते
मतलब थोड़ा मेहनत और करनी पड़ेगी, but मिल जाएगा.
Yes, yes, yes.
Always there.
Yeah. So you mentioned again a little about your work, leaning on from that to the next question. Tell us a little bit. So you mentioned that on weekends, you try and, put your time to other things, your hobbies as such. But do you have any thrills and frills about your job that you would like to share with our students today?
So, in my current role, I think the biggest thrill is, when we have a one-on-one with our CEO or with the board of director, with the director of the board, my bad. I think those kind of experiences, they always kind of teach you something new, because most often our interactions are a review of something that you've immediately worked on, right? And to have your work being reviewed by someone of that stature, even if it's a negative comment, you still learn something, because you know that, okay, this was a miss, and this was a miss because of this reason. And it kind of strikes you that, oh my god, that kind of person has that thinking and the ability to find that hole in your analysis in a few minutes, which I would have been working on, say, for months, and they would find it in a few minutes. Kind of has that light bulb moment, right? You want to learn more from them, you want to be around them a little more. That plus, again, working on something that gets published on your website, it feels good. So we are not an equity listed company right now, but even as debt listed company, we have very good disclosures. So I'm sorry for all the jargon, but any investor presentation that a company puts out, it's like a matter of pride for them. So to work on that, again, a big thrill for me. So every quarter it gets published, I feel really happy. So it's those kind of things, it's and it, plus, like I mentioned, like, it's learning. I mean, one day I'm working on some project, the second day it's a whole 180 degree on what I was doing. Perspective could change. So I think those kind of things keep us driven, and they keep us excited for the work. So
having a good company, having the right people, right set of people around you.
Yes, like I mentioned, right,
You
having
can
a good
always
team.
be.
Yeah, having a good team is very important. It's a cliche when you say that you don't leave a job, you leave your manager, but it's very, very true. It's very true. So having a good manager, having a good team, having a team that kind of supports your growth, that's very important in any kind of a role. So yeah, that's something that I find in my role right now. So let's hope it continues.
We wish that it continues, right?
Yeah.
Any piece of advice that you have for these budding aspirants, Saloni, based on your journey, right? If you would want to, tell them something that they should keep in mind.
So, reading was going to be my thing for this particular question. But since that no longer, I've already given all my gyan on that. I think one thing would be to always, try and keep your mind open. So, if you assume that your CV is not good enough and you don't apply, you will never stand a chance. All right. My CV was a very, non-fin heavy CV initially, and then it was a very credit risk heavy CV. So I was working credit risk for 4 years. I did not even, I was, had I, just seen the JD of this role that I'm currently in, the job description, I probably would not have seen myself as a relevant candidate. But I just took the chance and I applied anyway. And I think that is very, that is something that people should keep in mind. You should just be open, apply and see where you can get. I think that is one important thing. Second, it's a very minor thing, but for any finance aspirant, the session that you're hosting, right, or just as a segue next week you mentioned on macroeconomy, I think it's very good to keep up your basics up to date on that. It might sound silly right now, it might sound irrelevant right now, but a lot of your finance companies, especially, looking for that kind of market awareness. They're looking for that kind of, understanding of market dynamics. Doesn't have to be like stock market heavy, that you know everything that is happening in the stock market or happening in the economy, like A to Z, but know how the interest rates function, how inflation works, what kind of geopolitical dynamics are playing in the market these days. So if such a session happens, attend, listen to it, read up, research more. I think then that segues again into reading, right? So just read more about all of these things, and I think you'll be set. So
students who are preparing for an MBA, right? They are all, working really hard. They're all wishing, they are, all putting in the effort to get to a top-notch B school in the first place. Few of them, or probably most of them, or a fewer of them, right, have a great company and a certain amount of package in mind as well, right? But once you get to a top-notch B school, once you get to a top-notch company, to a top-notch profile, you have a good enough package. How does a manager then think further forward for their career? What are you thinking? If you would want to let us know, right, that how do you think further forward from there, right?
So I think think of it like a video game, right? Every next level you get to, you kind of keep unlocking more levels. You kind of keep getting more and more clarity on your own. So I think network plays a good role there, because you just keep talking to more and more people about their role, right? You suddenly hear someone say, that, okay, I've been working on this, and you think, okay, this might be something that I want to work on. And that's how then you kind of try to move your career there. But specifically, if you're talking about me, then I'm not sure where I want to be immediately in the next couple of years, because I've just gotten here. I'm just trying to understand, where I can take my career. But it's a very step-by-step learning. So you clear step 1, you move to stage 2, and I think then you kind of see that the haze clears, you have more people to talk to, you have more experience to bank on. And I think it keeps getting clearer with stages. I mean, when I was where these students are right now, I was still debating on finance or marketing or operations or what have you. I kind of wanted to narrow it on finance, but I still didn't have a very good answer for why MBA or a why finance, right? It gets built step by step. It's not something that you can envisage when you're sitting as a student or when you're appearing for these exams. I think it's a
discovery that you have to be a part of, right? But having to go to a top-notch B school, having to do well with the CAT examination, and then doing well with the interviews, and getting to a top-notch B school, as I've said, right, can provide for a greater launch pad, right? It is recommended, right, and we keep saying it all the time. But we would want to have your opinion on if you would recommend students working hard for the exam, and then probably trying to get to the best of their potential, and that does have an impact in how they are able to propel their career further forward. What do you think?
Absolutely. No, Abhishek, I think that's indisputable. So I think MBA is one thing where the brand that you get into plays a very significant role, because that's what attracts your recruiters, right? And most of the people are there for a job, let's face it. It's not for any of the other faff that we put out in our interviews. It's always a good job that you're looking for, or like a great, like you mentioned, like a launch pad. And a good brand can go a long way. For instance, the same company could be recruiting from a tier 1 college and a tier 2 college, and the gap in their pays might be 2x, or the gap in their grades might be 3-level gaps. And that might not sound like a big thing right now, but when you get into your corporate careers, you kind of start feeling those things, right? So this is the time when you want to push your absolute hardest, aim for the best possible school, don't have any other restrictions or kind of foundations in your mind about location, etc. Where your friends might be, or where you think you want to go. Do your research, rely on your faculty for their guidance, rely on your seniors for their guidance as well, and choose the absolute best option that is available to you. Because like I've mentioned, your first job, that matters a lot. It will drive your career, so it's a very clear example, right? In today's session also, I think most of you will take back JP Morgan. You will probably not take back Bank of Tokyo or Tata Capital, but JP Morgan being my first job, and being that kind of a label, you can only get from a good campus. JP Morgan, your GS, etc., do not do a lot of lateral hiring. All these great brands, they hardly do lateral hiring, right? So if you want to be associated with those, very, very critical to do your best right now. Just give that last push, get into a great school, and yeah, so I think it's very important.
Lovely hearing from you, Saloni. Thank you very much for making out such precious time for our students and enlightening them with what you've been doing, how you've been doing, what you've achieved. And we wish you good night, right? And we wish you good luck in your career, right? We hope to have you sometime again, right? If if you could make out some more time for our students. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Abhishek. All the best, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Students, in the meanwhile, right, we have the next guest in the meeting already with us, right? His name is Aditya Singh, right? He is the global head of governance, supply chain, also head of business operations for a country, right, for Splash Fashions, which is a landmark group company. There's a lot about this individual that I would want to speak about, right? But most of all, right, he happens to be my elder brother as well. So we have him, right? here, and I would be putting across questions to him, right, based on my intelligence, right. I have a few personal questions as well for him today, right, and with that, right, I would like to invite Mr. Aditya Singh, right. I'm not used to calling him by name, but yes, if you could come on the screen, and we can then kick off with the session.
Hi Abhishek.
Hello.
Let me position my screen. I hope I'm visible.
Yes, you're visible and audible.
Okay, great. Thank you for the long intro. You're wearing a nice blazer. Is that Splash?
Yeah, that's Splash.
Yeah,
that's Splash.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for having me on this. Always happy to connect with young minds. Always happy to understand their perspective, and I was there and in their place a few years back, so it's always good to know, has things changed, are the thinking still the same, are you guys still having the fun that we guys used to have. It's sounding that I'm very old, but yeah, it does feel that probably I was there some year back, and always good to connect back with the people. So Abhishek, I think we have done this few times now. I think, where you have been asking questions and I've been answering. And I'd like to follow the same. Before I do any event with public, I would want to understand my audience. If you can just give me a brief about what is the audience that we are talking to, at least then I can position my views accordingly.
So most of the students that we have, right, are preparing for CAT, of course, right. Most of them come from commerce background, right, be it BBA, BCom, BA Economics. A lot of them, of course, come from engineering background like ours, right. There could be a few students from design background as well, law background, certain from medicine, or medical surgery related courses as well. So it's a good mix, but largely students are from commerce and to a certain extent engineering as well.
Okay, great. So guys, ideally it would have been better if you would have done this in person. Actually, I hate doing online conversations, online meetings, online dialogues, especially with young people, because when you are in the room, you get a sense of their energy and that kind of builds in. But that's the reality, is we have to do this online. So what I would like the people in the meeting or in the podcast to do is, probably if you can type in chat your expected question. Of course, if you guys are spending your time, and I'm sure you guys are preparing for CAT, so every minute is very, very valuable. So if you guys plan to spend next 30-45 minutes, I would like to understand what is your expectation out of this session. What are the questions that are there in your minds? If you can probably put them in the chat, and maybe Abhishek, if you can help me summarize some of those questions, I'll try and answer most of them as we move forward through this session.
Certainly. So guys, you can put in your questions in the chat. Not spam, right? Try and put your questions together if you have multiple, right, in the chat quickly, right? So we are able to put that to Aditya. Okay, so there's one question on finance versus business analytics. There's a question on what your journey has been like. How did you put up on with the difficult days? What is your schedule like? How did you reach where you are? Some of the questions I believe I was anyway intending on asking. Yes. Oh. So I think, interview and MBA life experience, I think we should first off start with, what's your profile like? I've spoken a little about, what you do, but what does your daily, day look like, your routine day look like? Handling so many heads, right? Any highlight that you would want to put across to students from each of the roles that you do, and then we'll take the questions that are coming in the chat.
Okay, sure. So for everybody's reference, as I think Abhishek said during my intro, I head supply chain, business governance, which is basically strategy, and a territory called Egypt. You guys would have heard about a country. So we have Egypt as a retail territory. So I had these 3 portfolios in my current role. Supply chain, I've been heading for almost about 3 years now. Egypt, I've been doing for almost 1.5 years. Egypt basically is retail ops, retail operations. And then governance, or as we call strategy in India, I've been doing recently for about 6 and odd months. In terms of my daily routine, since there are 3 portfolios that I'm handling currently, it's hardly the same. So if you tell me what my typical day looks like, I reach office, say about by 10 in the morning, or rather I should start off before. What do I do? And that's, I think it's very, very important. I think what I do before office is more important than what I do in office. So I generally am up by 7ish in the morning. Then I have my coffee. I read certain stuff, maybe one or 2 articles from Business of Fashion, or certain articles from Economic Times. Then I work out from 7:30 to about 8:30. Come back, have my breakfast. I get to office, say somewhere about 10ish. I live 5 minutes away from the office, so that's an advantage. So I start my work somewhere around 10. And generally, it's most of them in the first half are meetings. So my first half, generally, the calendar is occupied with meetings. So say somewhere around 2ish, I have multiple meetings, mostly relating to strategy with other departments. And it also includes my daily meetings with my team members and the people who are heading sub departments in my team. And then post that, I have my lunch somewhere around 2:30ish. I start getting into my own work, generally figuring out the outcomes of the meeting. What am I supposed to plan next for that after the meetings? If there are any readings to be done for next day's meeting. Analysis is hardly any. I mean, I love to do analysis on Excels and all these stuff, but I hardly get time for that. So generally, I spend say around 2:30 to about 5:36 on these things where I do my own reading, own stuff. I prepare for next day's meeting. I prepare the agenda for the team. What are they supposed to do? And I track. I've got multiple MISs where I track my team's performance, whether they're doing it correctly or not. And then from 6 to about 7:30, that's the time that I generally like to devote to my team members. So generally on a week, if I am on a Wednesday, Thursday, or a Friday, I devote 6 to 7:30 to connect with individual team members in my team. Because as I figured out, I think the most important part of whatever function, it may be supply chain, finance, strategy, business, anything, people are the most important aspect of every department, every function. And it's very, very important, as I've realized, that you are connected with the people that work for you. So that 1.5 hours I like to spend with people. I want to understand what are their career ambitions and how are they going forward in that. Do they have any problems? We sometimes talk about personal life as well. We sometimes talk about things that are not even supposed to be discussed in the office, but that's how I like to connect with those people. Then about 7:30 to 8ish is when I prepare my plan for next day. So I look at my calendar for next day. What are the meetings? Have I prepared for all the meetings or not? And then about 8ish is when I put my laptop off and get back to home. Then of course I'll have my dinner. Sometimes if I'm in the mood, I'll go for a football game. If not, I'll probably play a PlayStation or something like that. And I've told you about my pre-office and post-office things because I think as you start becoming more busier in life, that's where the joy of life is. So that's where you enjoy your life, the things that you do pre-office and the things that you do post-office. Yeah, so that's approximate how my day looks like.
Right. So for the students, the questions in the chat, right? These can be put to three separate set of questions, right? So most of them were asking with respect to your preparation for CAT, right? How your interview preparation for MBA was like, and then your experiences at an MBA college. And people are also looking to know about the culture that is there at top-notch corporate, for that matter. How the is like during placements, or probably after that, what the culture is like. How do you get into that, seep into that culture? How do you set it further forward? You've spoken a little about culture, building that with your team. So yes.
Okay, so let me start from the beginning. Let me start from the fact that how did I prepare? Because I think, as you said, most of these aspirants are preparing for CAT, and most of them would be interested in knowing how do I prepare for CAT. As I've told Abhishek also multiple times, that I think CAT is an exam that just needs discipline. And I don't think it needs intelligence to that extent. If you're disciplined in your approach, and even if you can spare 2 hours a day, but it has to be 2 hours a day every day. Even if you break for 1 day, 2 days, if you break for a week, then you're down by a month, right? So it's as simple as that. The more disciplined you are, the better you do in an exam like CAT, because it's a repetitive exam. It's a time-bound exam. It doesn't have questions that you can't solve. It has questions that you can solve easily. If those questions are there in front of you for not more, for 6 hours, 10 hours, you'll solve all of these questions. The idea is you have to solve that in a 3 hours time frame. And hence, it's all about discipline. It's all about putting in those hours consistently, day in, day out. And that's where the deal is made or broken. And when I used to prepare for CAT, I used to always have this question that why is CAT an exam like this? Why can't it test intelligence? Why can't it have difficult questions but just 5 questions, right? So that they filter out people who are intelligent, not hardworking. And now that I've worked for, say, about 4-5 years after my MBA, I've realized CAT is designed on corporate life. In corporate, if you're dedicated, not dedicated to an extent that you spend 14, 15, 16 hours a day in office, dedicated to an extent that you're professional and whatever you're committing to deliver in that time, you're delivering. If you can do that, maybe you might not be the smartest that's needed in the room, but if you're committed, you're disciplined, and you can deliver everything on a time frame, you'll succeed. No corporate or no organization wants people who are smart but can't deliver for 8-9 hours a day. You have to be consistent if you have to succeed in corporate life, and even nowadays, even in government jobs. So CAT is modeled exactly on that. It needs you to be consistent. It needs you to be hardworking to an extent that you need to work 2-3 hours a day. That's mad. Because these days, whenever we say hard work and people say I am not hardworking, people find it offending when I call people hardworking, because everyone wants to be smart worker, right? And when I say hard work, I don't mean putting it 12 hours, 14 hours a day. It's just 2 hours, at max 3 hours a day, but consistently day in, day out. And that's how I also prepared for CAT. I took about close to 120 days wherein I prepared for CATs, wherein my first 90 days were all about making my foundation. So I started off with the same thing, quant, LRDI, and verbal. I used to have books from IMS, which I used to study. I, by the way, did not go to a coaching institute. I studied on my own, but I think coaching institute does help you out from a time perspective, that if you're not disciplined, it makes you disciplined. And of course, the material which I used was of help. So if you can, for say 90 or 120 odd days, if you can put in those hours daily, and then for the last 30 days before CAT, all you have to do is give as much mocks as possible. I gave about 101 mock exams. So if you can give mocks, because as I said, it's time bound, it's all about practice. It's not about solving the most difficult problem in the world. It's all about how fast can you solve it. So if you do that for say 90 to 120 days, and then after that, if you study, if you do mocks for say about 30 days, I think you're good to go. The more you do it, the better it will be, right? So when I say 90 to 120 days, it was a stretch for me. But if you do that for 200 days and then you give mocks for 60 days, you'll be better than what I was during the exams. So it will only make you better. The more you practice, the better you'll become. It's as simple as that for CAT. And I advise every candidate that's sitting for CAT to keep it simple like this. Just put in hours, study 2 hours a day, and then do mocks. So that's how I did the first leg of the journey, which was CAT. What is more difficult, according to me, in the whole process of B school is actually the GDPI, because CAT is, for them also, CAT is a filtration exam. They don't take students based on CAT scores. They take students based on the personalities. So CAT is just a filter exam. Once you go through that, then you'll have the round of GDs and interviews. Now, if you're an extrovert, and to some extent, I believe I am an extrovert, GDs and interviews are fairly easy for you because you know how to speak. You're an outspoken guy. You know where to speak and what to speak. It's just that you have to build content on what you want to speak about. And content you don't build that overnight, right? For CAT, as I said, you can prepare in 150 days. But what you want to speak in a GD, you can't build in 150 days time. You need to be a continuous reader, a continuous person who continuously follows current affairs, who knows what's happening in the world. You're not required to know everything in the world, but you're required to know things which are of your interest to you. So if politics is of your interest, if economics of your interest, sports is of your interest, you're supposed to know these things, right? So if you start preparing for CAT today, and I'm assuming you're preparing for CAT, which will happen this October or November or next October or November, always keep in mind, start preparing for GDPI as well from the same day. Don't wait for the CAT results to come and then you start your preparations for GDPI. So day one, you start your preparation for CAT. That's the day you start your preparations for GDPI, because in reality, GDPI is where the difference is made. Generally, the selection ratio in most of the B school is 2 out of 10. So it's 20% selection. And that's where, after the filtration, you have to go through, compete with the good minds of the country. So that's how you should be preparing, and that's how you'll crack your GDPIs. That's the journey till you enter into a B school. Now, I said CAT was simpler, GDPI is tougher. The journey in B school is the toughest. And I'm saying this after 5 years of my corporate experience. Once I've gone through that 2 years of MBA, which was filled with fun. It was an amazing 2 years, but it was also the 2 years which challenged me the most. Now, if you ask me, do I want to go back in time and go through those two years again? I'll do that happily, because of the fun that I had during those times, but also because of the learnings that I had during those 2 years. So when you step into a B school, say, for example, if I have to replicate what would a B school look like, right? Abhishek, as you said, most of these people are commerce graduates, right. I'm assuming from colleges in and around Ahmedabad. Right. Now, I'm assuming there would be 1 or 2 people who would be institute rankers in their respective colleges, right? Now, imagine if you're that institute ranker in your current college and you step into an IIM, say, for example, IIM Ahmedabad. You will have institute rankers from bigger, better colleges around you. There'll be people from SRCC, there'll be people from other DU colleges, there'll be people from colleges in South India, engineering colleges in South India. And these people would be the first and the second or the third in their colleges. If they are not institutional rankers, there will be people who are what we call an all-rounder in MBA, right? They'll be pretty good in studies, they'll be pretty good in sports, dance, the other activities, and they have gone into a B school because of their personality, maybe not because of their grades, right? So these are the people who will be around you, ultra competitive people. Everybody has been an achiever in their school or in general in their hobbies. And hence they enter a B school thinking that they've been a topper in their undergrad, and they'll be a topper in their postgrad as well. So that's the environment that you enter into. And hence, since you have reached there, you would also want to be competitive. Nobody goes into a B school and says that I'll take the worst job in the B school, right? If you're entering into a IMS Ahmedabad, Bangalore, Calcutta, Lucknow, Kozhikode, XLI, whatever the top colleges, you would want to take the best job there, right? You will not say, okay, I'll go to IMS Ahmedabad, I'll take the worst job. For you to be able to take the best job in that college, you have to be the best, right? You have to prove to the company that you're the best. And hence that whole competitiveness starts from there. Now, as soon as you enter a B school, you will have your first semester, which will be challenging academically. Then you will, in most of the B school, in your first 3 months, you will have selections for your club and committees. So club and committees, basically, people who are not aware, all the activities in a B school are run by students. So if you will have a mess committee that will run your mess, you will have a student council that will run all the activities on campus. You will have a sports committee, you will have a dance committee, and blah, blah, blah. So you will have selections for these committees, which is again is a competitive thing where you need to get into this club and committees. And then with that, you will also have your summer placements. So for the first 3, 4, 5 months, you will have boom, 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 one after the other coming, staring at your face. So basically at one time, you're juggling with 3 balls. And during these first 3 months, the average, the sleep that you get is about 3 to 4 hours a day. That is also on good days. As you reach closer to your placements, it'll be about 1 to 3 hours. And I know you guys would be thinking that you are not cut out for that. I was also thinking that I'm not cut out for a sleep pattern of 1, 2, 3, 4 hours. But believe me, guys, if you reach there, you will do it. You will be able to live for those 3, 4, 5 months with 2, 3 hours of sleep because everybody else is doing that. You guys will realize your own potential. You guys will realize how much can you push your limits because you see human beings like you, similar to you, who have done similar in their life doing that. And that's when you will actually learn how do you manage your time. When you realize that you just have 10 minutes to do your lunch, 10 minutes to do your dinner, forget about having time for breakfast. When you know how to brush your teeth in 2 minutes, that's when actually you realize how do you manage time. And that's one lesson that I think from whatever I've seen in my life, only a B school can teach. And that's one thing that will help you a long way in coming into a corporate life. Now, when I say that's one thing that only a B school can teach, it has to be a top B school if you want to learn that, right? Because as you slip down the pyramid, as you get into schools which are not top 10, top 15, the quality of student around you also drops. And hence, the challenge that you're facing, the competitiveness that you're facing also drops down. So that's about a B school. As I said, first 5, 6 months, extreme struggle, extreme time management. And then if you've got a good summer internship, half of your job is done. If you go to that summer internship after a year and convert that and make it into a PPO, a pre-placement offer, then your life is sorted from an MBA perspective. So I was one of the fortunate ones who got a PPO after my first year. And then second year, imagine now in first year, you have learned how to manage time. You have learned how to survive on sleep cycle of 2, 3, 4 hours. And then in the next year, you don't have to prepare for placements because you've already got a PPO. You probably don't have to worry so much about academics because you know you have a job at hand. Third, you're already part of a club or committee. Even if you're not, who cares, right? You have a very good job at hand. Now, with all the life skills that you have learned in your first year, you have 24 hours in each day for second year. And that's where you actually start exploring, start playing sports, start doing your hobbies, start doing stuff that you have not done. A lot of people started a startup of their own in campus itself. A lot of people start helping their juniors get placement and stuff. So if your first year, if you put in the hard hours in first 4, 5 months, your second year is where you're a much more efficient human being with a lot of time in hand. And that's when you can explore the other aspects of life. So that's how the journey from preparing for CAT, going through a GDPI, going through a B School program. Now, most of the people will tell you that the toughest phase in life is corporate life. I am one of those who doesn't agree to that. I feel probably B School was the most competitive. And then when you land into a corporate, and I speak this from experience, not of just one company, but a company before this, which was Aditya Birla Group, which was filled with B schools. Aditya Birla Group only hires from top 5 B schools. They don't hardly hire anyone in leadership positions from a lateral hiring perspective. So I was there in and around these people, where I had people from Ahmedabad, Calcutta, Lucknow, as I said, senior, junior, everybody else. But somehow people, when they have a good job, when they are into a good company, they become satisfied. And then the level of competitiveness reduces. Everybody's in their own sphere. Everybody's doing better than people who have not been to a B school, people who have not have the exposure of a good college. So then life starts becoming simpler. You're actually much more efficient compared to the other people around. You have certain skills that probably the other ones don't have it. So you already have an edge. And the biggest edge that you have in your corporate life, which will stay with you at least for the first 2 years, is your B school. The moment you walk into a room, and if you're a fresher or a management trainee or a general management trainee, and the moment you walk into a room and say, my name is Aditya Singh and I'm 2019 pass out of IIM Lucknow, I don't think 9 out of the 10 people will understand or remember Aditya Singh. They'll remember IIM Lucknow, right? It's a brand name that they'll remember, not my own name. So that badge goes with you everywhere, and that kind of gives you a perception. There's a perception at the other end that this guy is supposed to be smart because he's coming from a top B school. But as I said, the tag stays with you just for the first 2 years. And then if after first 2 years, even with the tag, if you're not doing well, then people do realize that not all B school people are genius or good managers. But of course, if you use that tag well in 2 years, if an average guy in your company is getting 3 opportunities, you'll probably get 30 opportunities. And that's when you make a mark, and that's when you take it forward from there. So as I said, CAT is simpler, GDPI slightly more difficult, MBA life much more difficult, corporate life the simplest.
Extremely comprehensively put. All of the dots, in my opinion, were connected with respect to, from where you start, how do you take it further forward, how you should be looking at preparing, from the interviews, getting into a B school, how a life at B school looks like, and, till you are at a corporate. Extremely well put. With this, the next question that I want to ask is, what is life like in Dubai, especially living in one of the most posh areas and building there? How is life like in Dubai?
So you've been to Dubai, Abhishek. You've lived in my building as well, so you know. And I'll not talk about just my own life in Dubai. I'll try and be as holistic and comprehensive as possible, because I do have batchmates and friends. Some of them are living in finest cities in India. Some of them have moved to Europe or UK. Some of them have moved to US, living in the big cities of US. Some of them, like me, are in Middle East, living in Dubai. Some have gone to Singapore, Southeast Asia, and all these stuff. Now, of course, the life standards are better in foreign countries, in these bigger cities of the world, like a Dubai or a Singapore or a London, New York. All these places, the standard of life is, of course, better if you compare it vis-a-vis to a Mumbai or a Delhi. And hence, everybody aspires, to move out of India and go to these cities. But even if you're in India, with the kind of salaries that you get after your MBA, which makes you about the top 3 percentile, in terms of not wealth, in terms of income. And if not in India, if you're outside, generally at your age, you're paid much better than the average crowd. And hence, like you said, a life in Dubai obviously is very, very exciting, at least in the initial days, right? Initially, when I shifted here, I loved seeing the view from my balcony. I loved driving a fancy car, going to these fancy clubs during weekends, uh, hanging out, spending your money on the weekends, all this stuff. But the point is, after a time, all of this becomes, it's still exciting for a fact that if I want to kill my time on weekends, I do have the resources because I'm in Dubai, but I'll still have the resources if I'm Mumbai. Uh, but at the end of the day, you have to also realize that you're not just lost in this world, right? You're not lost in a job where you're spending 10 hours and then you're coming back and then going to a party, getting dancing or drinking or whatever, and then coming back and again moving back to office. It's also very, very important to understand what is your calling in life. And it could be anything, right? For a lot of people, spending time with their families is very, very important. For a lot of people, not spending money and saving a lot of money is very, very important. For a lot of people, traveling the world is very, very important. And for a lot of people, it could be as basic as just going to their hometown, having a tea with their parents, or doing simple stuff like those. So life, of course, is, as you said, very, very exciting. While I'm in Dubai, in the heart of the city, in Marina and all these stuff. But after my initial 6 months, if you ask me on a general basis, how is it different from India? I'll say the life standards are better. And there are a lot of things to do. Do I do that every weekend now? No, mostly no. But yeah, the life standards are definitely better. But eventually you could be in India, you could be in Dubai, you could be in New York, you could be in London, you could be in a remote city in India as well. You need to identify what is your own calling. What is that gives you the most satisfaction? As I said, money, family, spending time alone, whatever is that. You need to understand that first.
All right. I've been, since you mentioned about, balancing and finding your own calling, I've been personally intending to ask this question for some time now, right? So that question is, how do you find time to follow your passion? And specifically, how do you keep yourself in such great shape, which I am struggling to do these days? So, yes.
So thank you for accepting that I'm in better shape than you are. I think that's been a challenge for the first initial 29 years of life. So you asked a question that how do I make time for things that I love? I think of it from the opposite way. So I firstly take out time for the things that I love, and then I make time for work, right? So I have a very, very strict policy that I don't do anything on a weekend. In spite of handling 3 portfolios in this company, in spite of being in the place where I'm one of the, and of course, because of a lot of things that has been in place, a lot of things have fallen into place for me. And I've been one of the fortunate guys that have moved up the corporate ladder. But in spite of being one of the younger people handling 3 portfolios, I have a very, very strict policy that don't work on weekends, because that's the 2 days that you get for yourself. If you realize after a point, if you're working for a corporate in these big cities, eventually you're working 5 days a week for that weekend itself, right? You're earning a lot of money during Monday to Friday so that you can have time to spend it on Saturdays and Sundays. So as I said, I have a very, very strict policy. I don't work on weekends. I have a very, very strict routine that I do work out before I go to office, because I know if I go to office, sometimes I end my office at 8, sometimes it might also end at 10, right? So I'll not be able to come back and work out. So it's better you start your day with what you want to prioritize, which is workout for me, which could be different thing for different people. And then generally, if I do come back from office, say about 8:30, I'll just have a slight light meal, And then, as I said, I can probably, once I probably go to play a football match, or I'll probably spend some time watching a match. So I think, as I said in my first statement, it's all about priorities for you. If you first spend time on what you love and what will make you go further in your career, if you spend time on that, and then you make time for work. A lot of people, especially people coming out of B schools, because of their competitive nature, have a perception in mind is that the more time they spend in their office is the farther they'll go in their career, which is probably not true. I've seen people who have had burnouts before they reached an age of 35. People who have retired from work because of mental instability, because so much they've worked during their initial years at an age of about 32, 33. So what will take you further in your career? The first thing is you have to be alive and healthy, right? If you are alive and healthy till an age of 55, 56, that's what will take you further in your career. If you have a very, very sorted personal life, that's what will give you the mental peace to go forward in career. And then comes the time you spend in office, the knowledge and all these things you gain. So it's very, very important what you prioritize and what you make time for.
Quite a perspective. Leading on from this answer to another question, and adding on my personal experience as well. And you've been quite authoritative. You've been very strong in the head, right? That largely comes with great discretion, which comes with greater knowledge on content matter and decision making. How did you build that? How should anybody build that, right? It's very difficult to be good at taking such calls and building such perspective.
Yeah. So I don't think everybody needs to be authoritative. I think that everybody has a style of their leadership. One of the reasons that I've been authoritative is probably because I've got a chance to manage a team at a very young age, and I had to adopt a leadership style, right? If you're managing a team which is mostly 10, 15 years older than you, and you have to manage them efficiently, there has to be a leadership style. It could be that I would have adopted a leadership styles where I've allowed people to lead, and then I would have been the one on the back seat. And that's also not a bad way to lead. A lot of people do get success out of that, but probably I related myself most being authoritative and a leader who's trying to lead from the front. Now, of course, if you want to be authoritative, you have to be an expert in what you say, or you have to be an expert on which you're trying to gain your authority. And I think one thing that's been very, 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 very obvious in my 5 years career is that you can only be authoritative if you're very, very logical in what is your ask and what is your question. Do I think I'm the best supply chain guy in my company? I don't think so. Do you think I'm the best guy in terms of making strategy for a fashion retail company in my company itself? I don't think so. But there are people who are assisting me for this. They're subject matter experts in my team. All I'm very, very logical when I'm asking them questions. I try and understand something. You should have very, very simple questions, and you should be very, very logical in your questions. If you have that kind of mentality where you're just trying to figure out the root cause of a problem, and then you're trying to derive a solution for that, then you're a short hit in your corporate life. But if you try and identify yourself as I'm a finance guy and I'll only look at finance problems, I'm a supply chain guy and I'll only look at supply chain problems, then probably you will have a lot of struggle going up the ladder.
Very well said about how management should be looked upon at what skills you need to build, and probably something which is safe from all kinds of automation, AI, right? This is one thing probably which would have lesser to no replacement going further forward.
Right.
The skill that you've been talking about. Talking about skill, right? Since you mentioned about being logical and being able to be asking the right questions, managing them, structuring them, and putting it into perspective for all of the subject matters and team members around. What has been that one skill, right, apart from this, if you have any, which you've been able to develop that you think has been pivotal in your growth journey? And how should one, look to find such a skill or develop such a skill once found?
So one of the first conversation I have with anyone who joins my team, and that's, I think, has been the mantra for me that I've developed in my short career. If you know how to manage people above you and below you, then you're sorted. You might have no idea about what you're doing in your job. You might be the worst in supply chain. You might be the worst in finance. But if you know how to manage people below you, when I say below you, people in your team, and you know how to manage your stakeholders above you, when I say above you, it could be your managers, it could be CEOs, board members. If you just learn how to manage these two stakeholders well, you're sorted. You're sorted in your career. Now, when I say that, and when I say you might be the worst in finance and supply chain, I'm not promoting that you guys go ahead and become the worst in supply chain and finance, right? How do you manage people below you? When you have to manage people below you, they need to respect you. Now, how do you gain that respect? Either you're the subject matter expert, or they feel you know something that they don't, right? So you need to have an edge against them. That's how you will gain the respect of your team members. Now, that edge could be as simple as managing team. That edge could be as simple as being empathetic with your team members. That edge could be as simple as that you're a better listener than they are and you're listening to them. So that's how you manage people below you. How do you manage people above you? So people above, majorly your CEOs, CXOs, board members, they have very less time and a shorter attention span. If you will ever happen to meet a CEO of a company or a board member of an organization, they will only listen to what you're saying for 2 minutes. After that, they might listen, but they will not have the attention span. So there's a word that is commonly used in the corporate language. It's called management proof or idiot proof communication. How do you explain your team's work or your work to people above you who have no idea on the on-ground things that are happening, but want to understand whether you're on top of it, whether that's performing better or not? So how do you effectively communicate whatever that you and your team are doing to your people above? That involves, of course, doing analysis in Excel's, Power BI. That involves making presentations. That involves delivering those presentations. But with this or without this, if you have understood how do you deliver that communication to people above you, you've managed people above you as well.
Extremely insightful, right? I believe students are enthralled by everything that you're saying and how you're putting things into perspective. I would like to take this opportunity to thank you. And, I would like to thank IMS for providing this opportunity to, get a chance to speak to you for, at length, right? Generally, I don't get that opportunity to do that so often as well. And thank you very much for your time, right? For our students. And yes, it's been a lovely, insightful, perspective that you've given to students. And I'm not used to taking your name, so I'll say good night, Bhaiya. And yes, I'll keep reaching out to you whenever you have time and I have time. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Abhishek. Thank you so much for all the people listening. Thank you for the time. Have a good CAT exam. Have a good preparation. All the very best for your future.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. With that, we have the third guest, right? We've extended a little on our schedule, right? But we have the third guest with us, right? Somebody who has been a prodigy, right? Ever since, he put his head to, what he wanted to do, right? So we have Parth Chowdhary with us, right? Just give me a moment, Parth. I'll, make you the co-host so that, you are able to, put yourself on screen. So to tell you a little about Parth, right? Parth is currently at McKinsey, right? He has been a graduate of SRCC. He's been, one of our favorite students. He's been, one of the students that I admire, not only as a student, but also as a professional, as somebody, right, whom we as an entire team look up to, right? He has been one of those students who has, so there are several entrances, right, during your bachelor's days, right? Some of the prominent entrances, he's probably topped India for 4 or 5 of those entrances, right? Pardon me if I'm, taking a number less or two. For IIM Indore, he was All India rank 7, right? He has scored a 98.8 percentage in CBSE Commerce, which is the highest by any student ever in Gujarat. Then he went to SRCC. He topped CAT for Gujarat, right? After that, he took up a job at McKinsey, right? He got into IIM Ahmedabad, right? But he wanted to be pursuing his role currently that he's doing. He has also taken GMAT, right? Scored a 770, right? If I'm not wrong. Has gotten a deferred MBA admit to Kellogg at Northwestern. And there's so much more to speak about Parth, right? He's always been, one of those kids that we are very, very proud of having. So Parth, with that, right, I'll start with the first question itself, right? What do you do at McKinsey, right? What does your routine day look like, and how's it? If you could tell our students.
Sure. Thank you for the overly kind introduction. Very happy to be here speaking with everyone. Just to quickly talk about, say, McKinsey and consulting in general, right? First, about consulting, I think it's a little bit of a black box for everyone, right? I say when we hear about it, it's not really clear ki karte kya hai, right? So basically, consulting in general, you can think of it as like the doctors of business, right? So when there's a business or any organization, they face a lot of problems that they have to solve, right? They have to keep growing, they have to take strategic decisions, and they have to implement them. And at a lot of points in time, they aren't aware of what's the best way to do that. Ultimately, they hire consultants, right? There are multiple types of consultants, not just, so McKinsey is largely a management and strategy consultant, but there are other consultants as well, right? So for example, you would have heard of all the big 4 accounting firms. Those are generally firms that operate in tax consulting, right? Or they do financial consulting. So if, for example, if there's a big firm, it's got a lot of complicated operations, everyone knows India mein tax ke rules kya hai, right? But the idea is, what's the best way for me to manage my taxes, right? For that, they will hire a tax consultant. In a very similar way, for example, if there's a company and it sees that say digitization, right, is something which is happening in a very big way, but they don't know how to really adapt to it, right? And it could be a legacy type player, right? Suppose it's a player in agriculture, right? So for them, maybe digital is very, very out of their comfort zone. So then they'll probably hire a management consultant. They might hire a McKinsey, which will help them in that journey, right? So in general, the idea is that consultants help you solve problems. Those problems can be business problems. They can be non-business problems as well. It's not just for-profit organization, right? There's a lot of consulting which happens in the social space as well. So for example, maybe the government would hire or would engage a consultant to maybe understand what should be their plan for a 2047 vision, right? 100 years of independence. Maybe they might hire a consultant to decide to help them improve voting rates in elections, right? Maybe they want to increase voter turnout. So it can be a very wide range of problem statements that you're doing. Something which some people here might find very cool is that consultants can also help IPL teams form their auction strategy, right? So it's really an endless range of problems that you can solve. Now, that's really about what the sector as a whole does, or what the industry as a whole does. Now, what do you do, right? Of course, it really depends what role you are in, etc., etc. All of those differences will exist. But to talk about my own case, so I am working with McKinsey as a business analyst, right? Which is basically the front-end consulting role that they have for undergraduates. Essentially, in consulting, or at least in McKinsey, it's a very non-hierarchical space. What that means is that everyone, you might occupy different roles, and obviously you have different levels of experience, but ultimately you're working together, right? So when you're in that room and you're discussing something, the partner has an equal say, and so do I, right? Obviously, I know that they'll probably be more right than I am, but ultimately everyone's opinion has equal value. So in that sense, broadly, consulting is just so broad that it's very difficult to give one answer. But what you do is essentially you're trying to solve the problem. How you do that is you split it up into different work streams, right? You basically say, if I have to take digitization, if I have to try and digitize this company, there are maybe 5 different things that I need to do, right? Maybe one is to create the whole vision. Second is to look at the people. Third is to look at the IT infra. Fourth and fifth, things like that. So you first segment the problem into different work streams, and then say different analysts or associate take up one work stream, and then you work for that, right? So then anything and everything related to that work stream is yours to do, right? You have to ultimately be an owner of that work stream, and you're not just an employee or something like that. It's your work stream. You have to take charge of everything that you need to do. So if it's, running analysis on Excel, if it's finding vendors, if it's discussing with client people to understand what their requirements are, if it's, say, discussing with other experts in the industry to understand what, the best of the companies in that industry are doing, you do that. You do everything, right? So I think that's just a quick synopsis, but yeah, happy to say more if anything interests anyone.
So you mentioned that, consulting can be a lot of variety, right? It requires a lot of versatility.
Yeah.
Specifically, students are generally, not very certain about what a front-end consulting role is like, what a back-end consulting role is like. So if you could throw some light on that particular matter.
Sure. Again, as for everything related to consulting, it depends. But in general, front-end is, again, it's not really about one is good or one is bad, right? Let me just get that out right off the bat. It's really about what type of function you will be playing, right? So in the front end, you will have a lot of role to play in terms of building the client relationship and engaging with them directly, right? So for example, even if you've created a solution for them, a front-end consultant will be the one who's discussing it with them, aligning with them, maybe taking their feedback and sort of refining the solution and doing all of that. Someone in a back-end consulting role will be providing a lot of the research brain for it, right? So for example, if today I say I need to help them understand if this is a step that they should take for them, they want to understand how big the market is, how big, say, the digital market is for XX product. So that's something that probably a back-end consultant will be better suited and better equipped to do in terms of leveraging, say, digital resources. There's a lot of paid data available as well, right? So you are the person who's going to use all of that and sort of create the data view for that. I think that's a simple example of how that differs.
Parth, the next question is something, that, I would want to ask on behalf of all the students that we have. Preparation is extremely important, right? No matter what you do. I'm pretty sure you might have gotten this sometime from some of your friends or, in people in your circle that Parth has been extraordinary since the very beginning and he does things easily. But I have personally seen your hard work, right? The amount of diligence that you've put in, right? Your preparation, right? Tell us a little about your preparation during school, undergrad admissions, undergrad program, your CAT preparation, your GMAT preparation, getting to Kellogg, getting to McKinsey, right? Tell us a little about that. How do you pep yourself up? How do you keep yourself, motivated to be pulling off things the way you do all the time?
Got it. So I think obviously because there are multiple different things and they have different prep schedules, I'll just talk about a few of the main lessons and learnings that I have gotten, right, which have been applicable across all of these. Number one, I think, is definitely that you have to give value to the process, right? So even in terms of CAT, GMAT, placements, anything it might be, right? You have to attach a lot of significance to the journey itself, right? It's very easy to get lost in the fanciful dream of what the end goal is, but if you're not solving for the process first, you're doing it wrong. Now what I mean by that, right, asli mein, like, okay, these are just words, but like uska implication kya hai, right? The implication is that you sort of give a lot of importance to understanding what is the best way to prep, right? And that knowledge you get from speaking with people, say, who've done it in the past, right, who'll generally be your seniors. You'll get that knowledge from, speaking, say, if it's CAT, GMAT, you'll speak to your faculty mentors, right? So when you speak to these people who have been there, done that, who've seen how it is done, you sort of understand what is the best way to do it, right? Because anyone can get the book, but to get the most out of that book, you need to know how to read it, right? So in that same way, you need to attach a lot of importance. Then when you understand what has to be done, then the next step is to actually create a plan which works for you, right? So I think both things are important there. Creating the plan, and B, that works for you, right? About A, the idea of creating a plan is that it makes your life easier. Again, not everyone is equally comfortable. Everyone has different personalities. Not everyone likes to be very rigid or have a schedule, right? Of course, you have to adjust things for yourself. But basically, at least for me, what has worked is to make it very crystal clear, right? I don't want to wake up every morning and think, what do I have to do to prep today? I want that to be very clear. I want that to be clear before I even went to sleep the previous night, right? So for me, at least, what works is, again, I just make an Excel for everything that I do, right? And then ultimately that's just a long list of the things that I have to do, right? So for example, if it's CAT prep, right? So for me, that had multiple sections. I think one section was about mocks. So I just created for it every, say, few days, I just created a mock schedule for the next, say, 2 weeks. So then I don't need to think about, kaun sa mock kab dena. I just go and give it, right? So that's mocks. Then of course, with that, I also fit in the mock analysis segment to it, things like that. If the next thing is, say, solving, right? So for that, I just created a plan of, say, every day, say, I'll do these, say, 3-4 exercises in quant, and I'll do 2 exercises of verbal, etc., depending on how many total number of exercises we had, etc. So I just created a very simple plan for it, and then I just did it every day, right? It becomes very simple. Third thing was, again, everything else, right? So for me, for example, for RCs, I was doing multiple RCs every day. I was reading a few articles every day, right? So all of those things as well, I just put on the sheet. So now what happens is that when I wake up today morning or tomorrow morning, I don't need to think, kya karna hai? I already know what I have to do, and I just go and do it, right? So that does 2 things. Number 1, it saves your time, right? And reduces sort of repetitive effort. And number 3, it sort of frees up your mind space. So every point in time, you're not thinking ki kya main sahi prep kar raha hu. You're really focused on the content of it, right? So now I don't need to really think ki, CAT prep karne ka best strategy kya hai. All I need to do is, right, how can I get more and more of the questions correct, which is ultimately all that matters, right? So I think that's why prepping well and giving a lot of importance to the process has been crucial for me. Number 2, and something that I already mentioned, I think, is to leverage the right people and resources, right? As again, in CAT, GMAT, all of these things, you have your faculty members, right? In anything related to college, you have your seniors, right? I think the value that these people add, which is often not clear at the start, is that they have the answers, right, to a lot of the questions. It's like, even if you have 10 questions, obviously they can't answer all of them for you, because some of them will be very specific to your case. But if you can get 8 of your 10 questions answered in one conversation, again, you are free to discuss and explore those 2 questions in more detail, right? So it's the same thing even in, again, just to take CAT GMAT examples, in a CAT exam, if the section has like 24 questions, and if you're able to do, say, half of the paper, which is very easy, if you're able to do that in like just 10 minutes, what you're doing is you're freeing up time for the difficult questions, right? In that same way, you should try and get the answers to all of the simple questions, because from the people who've already done it, and then the questions which are really difficult, which you have to contextualize for yourself. For example, what style of study works for me? That's not a simple question that no one can answer for you. That's something that you have to do for yourself. You have to experiment multiple things and understand. So for the difficult questions, you keep up time, you save your time. And third is, I think, you have to genuinely have to take an interest, right? For me, for example, CAT, right? From the moment I started prep, I had no intention of taking the admit, right? So frankly, for me, there was no motivator in terms of the actual outcome, right? So the whole and sole reason why I did CAT prep was because I liked it, right? I enjoyed it, right? Again, I don't expect that to be true for everyone, right? But the point is that when you take an interest, it's just something that naturally starts flowing, right? And the purpose and the benefit of that flow is that the things which seemed impossible, they just become normal, right? It's just that if I ask someone to give a mock every day, they'll say this is impossible. But when you're actually in the process, when you're actually in that space and you're enjoying it, you look forward to it, right? And I don't have a quick solution or quick answer to how do I become interested, but you have to just figure that out for yourself. And when you do, you'll see the difference. So I think these are 3 things that I felt have been the most important learnings. 1, attach a lot of value to how you prep. Number 2, leverage the right resources. Number 3, take an interest.
Lovely, very well put together, right? Parth, you mentioned about what you've been able to find in terms of what works for you, how it is going to work for you, how has it been working for you. Any skill or 2 that you believe you've been able to develop through this process? You mentioned about process is really very important. That has been, extremely pivotal in your growth journey. What are those, skill or 2 that you would want to mention, and how important a role those have played in your career thus far?
I think very interesting question. I think I have always felt that the biggest and most important things are always mental, right? It's really not about the content. Which is to say, for example, in CAT, it's really not about which formula you know, but just being able to apply the things that you already know, right? So you need to be in that mind space where you're able to work, right? Where your mind is able to work. And I think the process has taught me, I think, says three main things, right? Number one, discipline, right? So it's like you can create all the best trackers and planners in the world. Doesn't matter if you're not following them, right? So discipline, how you sort of ensure that you are doing things consistently. And when you do things consistently, it will always work at the end, right? Number two is prioritization. When you understand the scope of what can be done, you also understand everything can't be done, right? So you know that it's just not physically possible for you to do everything, and hence you have to prioritize. For example, in my case, in terms of say my CAT prep, right, or my GMAT prep, I understood that it would not be possible for me to attend lectures or to do lectures. Again, for me, I was lucky because I had already done all the lectures thing when I was in my prepping for undergrad exams. Hence, I had a fair grasp on the content. So I didn't need them too much, but again, I could have still done them, but I chose not to do them, right? And when I chose not to do them, I actually freed up my time to actually give enough importance to the mocks and as well as the self-solving, which works best for me. Hence, number two, prioritization. And number three, I think is more in terms of the mindset, right? So ultimately with time, what you have to do is to build the mindset where it's not really about perfectionism, but it's really about setting your own bar and meeting that bar, right? So it's not about going 100% every single time, but it's just about understanding what is the fair bar that will get you to achieve whatever you're going for. Right? For example, again, CAT prep, if you're said planning to do it over 6 months, every ideal case is that every single day you do your prep, right? That's 100%. Everyone knows you can't ever achieve 100%. But then you have to set a fair, true bar, right? You can't go and say 50% is my bar, right? And then say I achieved it, because that has no value. For example, then you'll say 95% is my bar. As long as I know that I am not skipping on days more than 5%, I'll be fine with it. And I'll not even give myself guilt for it, right? That's also very important. But it's like if you don't set a fair bar, for every single day that you don't do all of your exercises, you will feel, oh no, I'm a bad person, I'm not dedicated enough. But that's just normal. That's just how it works, right? If, for example, during my CAT prep, CAT happens around say end of November, and I had my placement processes in September, I feel September or October, something like that. Obviously, at that time, I took quite a few days off from CAT prep, but I was able to do that because I already knew that's going to come, and I sort of built in that mental perfectly acceptable. And I think that's why I think what the process taught me, right? A, discipline, B, prioritization, C, the right mindset. Yeah.
It's a lot of mindset preparation, right? And having that clarity of thought. You very well put the point, that it's also about knowing what you can't do, right? You should not be asking more than, what you can from yourself, right? You need to be very practical. You need to be very logical and deliver the best of your abilities, and not, unnecessarily let your mind and space and, time and effort go out to things which are not necessarily, probably certain times not under your control, or are exogenous, or something that you should not be putting focus to at that point of time. Very, very well said, Parth. Parth, you've been working with McKinsey, right? Consulting, as you mentioned, is very dynamic, right? The kind of project that you get, right? It depends totally on that. How do you balance your work and play? What's your play, right? We also want to know what's your play. What's your passion? How do you find time to get to that? And what is life like a consultant apart from work? Like, what all opportunities you get to get to that play or passion part as well?
No, for sure. I think first of all, the obvious answer is that consulting is a very intense profession in general, right? It is known to be one of the professions where you do have to give in a lot of hours, and that's fine, right? I think that's also a reason why in the processes when they're hiring consultants, right? I think what they strongly look for is fit, right? Of course, you need to be smart, etc. You need to be able to be strong on the knowledge and the content side. But until and unless you're not a fit for the lifestyle, it's not something that's going to work out, right? So I think it's not meant for everybody, and it doesn't need to be for everybody, right? So you automatically sort of filter out in terms of who it works for. Now, but given even irrespective of the fact that it's a hectic lifestyle, right, at least Monday to Friday, I think both ways, right? In your work itself as well as totally beyond your work. Now, when I say in your work, I think it's in consulting, it's very important for you to find your own sort of firm, right? So at least in McKinsey, what it's called find your my McKinsey, right? So because McKinsey is such a large company, obviously you won't work with everyone, right? And in fact, you'll probably have nothing to do with 80% of the people in the firm. right? So ultimately what you have to do is you have to build your own McKinsey, which is the set of people that you like to work with, right? Or the people that you will probably keep on working with more and more, or just engaging with them in some way or the other, right? And when you do that, even work becomes very, very enjoyable, right? I don't, not that again, people can't have interests outside of work, and you should, but even work then becomes so much more lighter, right? Because it's more like, it's, for me, at least at this stage, I've been very fortunate to find a very interesting and lively set of people to work with. And it really seems like I'm still back in college, right? Because ultimately, even though there's, there's actual hardcore work happening, a lot of value at stake, etc., but the kind of environment and atmosphere that you're in is really in terms of just, let's go and get it done, right? So it's a very well bonded team. So that's, I think, within work. But of course, beyond work as well, at least for me personally, it's really about sort of experiences at this point in time. I'm 22, so right now all I want is to view and explore different things in the world and in life, right? So that's my thing. So every weekend I try and, as long as it's possible, I go somewhere. I try not to go back home. This weekend I'm in Delhi, next weekend I'm in Mumbai. So just sort of get to meet more people, have fun with friends, trying to travel as much as I can, as long as I can make time for it. But yeah, I think for me, beyond work is really about just new experiences.
That shows, with, when we bumped in around Baroda, right? When we were not intending on meeting, but we bumped in, right? So yes, you do that, right? You find your play. Parth, one question that I've been intending to ask, right, is, you've been one of the most talented, hardworking, intelligent, yet humble, right? I just wanted to ask this question from the very depth of my heart, right? And yet very humble, right? That I've come across, right? Being able to achieve so much at a young age, right? How do you maintain this humility? Now, I don't ask this in a manner, wherein I largely wanted to know from you, but rather what I would say is, I know that, this takes you a long, long way. And the students that we have here must take a leaf out of that book of yours. So please let us know.
I think, first of all, I think that's again an over exaggeration. But I think the only thing for me, at least, is, just when you interact with people and you understand how much more there is to do and how much more you can do, right? I think that's ultimately the most humbling experience, right? So you can do 10 things, but when you meet with people, you speak with them, you understand how there are 20 more things to do. It's just, it automatically stops you from getting complacent.
Okay. All right. But if you could, throw some light on building a profile, CV points, this, that, whatnot, right? Students have a lot of questions with respect to profile, CV points during placements, right? You are, one of those students who've gotten into a front-end consulting role right after bachelor's, right? Generally, students are aware about certain processes that happen at an MBA college, and then them getting into a consulting role. But what has been your experience like at SRCC and after that with this particular role?
No, I think two things, right? Number one, in terms of why a profile or a CV matters, right? And that's something that I've at least personally always felt, is that you can be the best candidate for a job or for a role or for an organization, for anything. It doesn't matter at all until and unless you have a chance to prove that you're the best, right? And generally, in terms of how the process works, that chance is the interview, right? So until and unless you're there in that interview room where you can convince them that you are someone who has the capability and the skill and the personality fit to do that job well, it has no value at all, right? Even in college, there's always so many people who you feel will make great consultants, right? But if they're not getting an interview invite, that doesn't matter at all, right? And I think ultimately, fortunately or unfortunately, for good or for bad, that process is your CV, right? It is your CV which ultimately has to reflect who you are and has to reflect a strong personality, which gets you that interview invite. So that's number one in terms of why it matters, right? Then number two, in terms of how you do it, right? Again, there's no real, there's no wishing well here. The simplest answer is just go out and do it or start, right? I think that's one thing that I have personally, again, because I've spoken to a lot of juniors through the years, I think that's one thing that I've seen common across individuals, that people spend a lot of time strategizing. Well, of course, that is important. I think it is much more important for you to just grab onto whatever opportunities you get and to start. right? So for example, competitions in college, right? So these competitions generally don't have any entry criteria, right? So they're open to all, right? But what happens in a lot of cases that people spend the first 1.5, 2 years of their college life just thinking about, what's the best team to start to try competitions with, or what are the best resources I should read before starting, say, case competitions. And I think that is something which ultimately prevents you from growing, right? Because in most cases, a lot of the learning comes when you actually do it, right? Even say competitions, whatever it might be. So again, point one is to place a lot of emphasis on actually trying as opposed to just planning. Number two is to just be a little mindful in terms of doing different things, a variety of things. And I think the strong thing and the good thing about today's day and age is that people are fine with that, right? I think, again, I can't speak for how it was earlier, but at least today people are very comfortable with the idea, even recruiters, that at least when someone is in their undergrad or even probably in their MBA or their postgrad, they are still exploring, right? Earlier, I think there was a mindset wherein you were like, you have to show dedication or specialization. Of course, if you are choosing a specialization, you're going into its details, obviously you'll do well. But even if you're not, it's not the end of the world, right? So if your undergrad, if your CV at the end of your undergrad doesn't have one thing which is standing out, right? It's really about you having done 10 different things. That's perfectly all right. And that's something which you should sort of take and sort of gain confidence out of, right? Just okay, keep in mind what are the broad segments of a good profile or a good CV, right? Number one, academics, obviously. Again, a lot of people often feel, why are they saying academics? I don't want to do academics. It's, my way of learning is different. Again, while that's absolutely fair, the simple answer is that companies need a simple way of filtering people. There's just no way for them to interview 400 applicants, right? And for them, one of the simplest parameters is academics. Why? Is because if someone has performed well in academics, that automatically, it's not really about them being smart, right? But what that really means is they're disciplined and they're dedicated, right? So if someone has been through a good college experience and at the end of it, they've emerged with a strong GPA, they had to have been disciplined and determined, right? And I think that as a personality trait matters much more to, again, not just consulting firms, but any firm in the world, right? Say skills are always trainable, right? You don't know Excel, you can be taught in 1 week. What can't be taught is, say, the ability to learn, or the interest, or genuine interest in learning, or a passion for sort of improving yourself. Those are things which can't be taught.
That's why there's a personality test, right? All place. They are trying to test your personality more than your skills.
Exactly. So while skills are obviously very important, right? They're never enough. It's not just them. So it's always a very good to have, but it's not the only thing which matters, right? So I think hence, again, just to come back to like the different broad sections, right? One is academics. Say second is usually looked at in terms of, at least in DO colleges, as PORs, which is positions of responsibility, right? Either your participation in college societies or say even societies and or organizations beyond college, right? So that's where you get a lot of hands-on experience, right? So if you're organizing an event, you get to see a lot of realities, right? You get to interact with more people, you get to manage people, you get to do some very basic things, right? So, and I think even when I'm working, right, and that's something that I've noticed to have been very, very important, right? Because today, for example, if in college, I was the president of the Economic Society, and we tried to run it as well as we could, right? And in that, again, we learned so much about how professionalism works, right? How to send good emails, how to create clean Excels, how to say, create some simple presentations, right? All of these things, which are very essential skills, are say basics, right? You learn automatically and you learn without doing a Coursera course, right? So I think that just is a very efficient as well as a very enjoyable way of learning a lot of practical skills. So that's number two, which is POS. Third is, of course, internships, right? Again, internships, brand matters, profile matters, and work also matters, right? Ultimately, that's just the truth of how it is. In terms of internships, I think what largely one or two quick learnings there would have been in terms of experimenting, right? So I think internships are a very efficient and effective way for you to explore a function or a stream or a industry, right? Ultimately, you can't go and take a full-time job in 10 industries, right? That's just not possible. And an internship is a very safe way for you to do that. obviously, again, if you already know what you're interested in, then internships become an entry route for you to actually convert an opportunity, right, in terms of a PPO. But even if that's not what you're looking at, just for you to explore and to learn about different things, again, great way, right? Lastly, is extracurricular activities, right? Again, this is generally quite broad, right? Say it can include, say, you doing research work, you writing articles, you say maybe competitions, right? Anything you're doing on the social front, maybe you're doing event management. It can be it's something that has full flexibility in terms of how you want to define it. So ECA. So I think these are four broad buckets in anyone's profile or CV, right? Academics, PORs, internships, and ECA. What I have generally seen, especially in consulting firms now, is that they look for people who are above average in all, right? So again, you've shown that you have done good things in all of these, and you have a standout record in at least one of these. So basically, you need to have above average academics, PORs, internships, and DCA, and then at least one of these needs to be very unique to you, or you have to done you should have done exceptionally well.
More
So
of a
this
spike.
a spike, right? Again, I didn't want to use the word because then that's very consulting specific. But yeah, in general, also, I think that's what makes a good profile, right? Because it shows both things, right? It shows that you have both breadth in terms of you having experienced a range of things as well as depth. So I think that's my 2 cents.
You mentioned about this particular process, and one thing I would like to take your validation on that. While you mentioned that you need to be taking actions. It's strategy without actions is not taking you any place, right? While taking actions, there's a lot of variables that you encounter that you would not have thought in the first place. Having to encounter those variables, going to build a profile or building your CV is not only something wherein you are doing what you're interested in, is also a lot of you discovering your own personality as well, I believe. And that's really very important, because that is something which would be reflected in your CV or resume. And that's really very important because big firms, top-notch companies, only thing that is premium for them is time, right? And they are not going to interact with you for a couple of hours or for a day or sometime like that for to get a hold of your personality. So yes, very well said, Parth, and something that all of the students must work upon. One last question, Parth, before I let you go. Right, I am really apologetic that we had to stretch the session a little. Generally, for the students who are preparing, I asked this question to Saloni as well, who was our first guest today. Generally, for the students who are preparing for an MBA, right, they're looking to get into a top-notch B school, and then they're looking at a top-notch profile company, probably a top-notch package as well, right? Something that is there in the back of their head always. But once you are there, right, what kind of thoughts come to you? How do you plan for something next? Like, you've gotten into Kellogg, right? But you must be thinking of what after that already, right? Probably, right? You could correct me if I'm wrong. How do you prepare, your mindset and your aspirations on your plans further from that point onward, right? Having been there already.
No, I think that's very fair, and I think that sort of also happens a lot. A lot of it happens automatically, right? So if if I am not in McKinsey seems unimaginable, right? Mm-hmm. But now that I'm here, this is the normal, right? Because again, if I'm 90% of people that I will interact with daily are in McKinsey, right? So now this is the normal, right? So hence automatically, when you achieve one thing, that becomes the base, right? And hence now you look at bigger, better, and bolder things. So I think that's just how it automatically sort of keeps flowing. And you sort of, again, you keep going above and beyond what you would have otherwise imagined, right? For example, if I now look back and to say to a time when I was in school, right, probably none of the things that I have done would have been imaginable. And it would have been very, very difficult to even visualize how it's possible. But it's only when you do one thing at a time that you sort of then the next thing keeps happening, right? So for example, in my case, I think in 12th, first thing was to do very good in boards, right? That got me to SRCC. And now if I'm in SRCC, maybe the next best or most important thing is to get into some very good societies, right? And do great work there. Maybe all of that got me to an internship where I interned with, say, City, right? City is one of the good internships that come to campus, and hence probably I got an interview invite for McKinsey, BCG, etc. Then again, I prepped well for them. I converted that. Now I'm here. All of that simultaneously would have helped me in my GMAT applications as well. So I think it's really about taking it sort of one step at a time, but of course knowing what the future steps are, right? And I think that's broadly my journey as well in terms of how it's possible, right? Because ultimately everything is possible, right? If someone's doing it, you can do it.
Of course.
But the idea of making it true for yourself or to execute that for yourself sort of needs you to sort of focus on the next thing, but of course keep your vision far ahead.
Once you take a step, you have more clarity on the next, and so on and so forth. Lovely speaking to you as always, Parth. Students have been really, glad that you were able to make out time, right? A consultant from McKinsey, right? Late at night, right? Making out such precious time for them. Students, if you are, wanting to say something to Parth, thank him, right? This is the time. You may put your responses in the chat. Thank you very much, Parth, right? You have a good career, you have a good life, right? And we wish you all the very best, right? From the bottom of our hearts.
Thanks so much. Happy to be here as always.
See you.
See you. Bye.